Hello, creatives. Welcome back. We missed you. Thank you all for joining our live stream collaboration with Creative Mornings Jeddah. Let me start by introducing myself. I am Sha'il Al-Muammar, the Speakers Coordinator at Creative Mornings Riyadh. Today, our inspirational speaker is Ahmed Naseer. Ahmed Naseer is a strategy consultant at the Saudi Industrial Development Fund and the co-founder of startwithhow. Again, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and thanks to our speaker for preparing the talk. And now I hand the lead to our speaker. Enjoy the talk.
Thank you, Michelle. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on wherever you're tuning in from. Can I just get a quick thumbs up for those whose videos are on, if you can hear me? Perfect. Okay. I'm delighted for the opportunity to speak to you on a topic that's very close to my heart today, and I thank Creative Mornings Riyadh Jeddah for the opportunity. I was told that this is the last of the live stream series, so I'd like to think that they saved the best for the last, and I hope this will be worth your while. I want to begin by sharing with you the context of how this talk came about. It was 3 years ago at the same time, in the month of May 2017, that I just finished my examinations and I was on the verge of graduating from my undergraduate degree. It was around the same time that I was on a flight back home to Riyadh, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of anxiety, fear, and confusion on what the next chapter of my life was going to look like. Fast forward 3 years to today, in May 2020, I have a different sense of fear and anxiety today, and that is that there's hundreds and thousands of people around the world and in the country that are graduating at the same time, but they don't realize that what they're about to do is enter the greatest years of their life. So I'm here to tell you that if you're graduating at the age of 21 and 22, you're about to enter the best 5 to 8 year window of your life, some of the most exciting years that you should look forward to. And here's why. You're about to enter the land grab of happiness. For someone like you, the chances are, for most of you, and I hope it's all of you, that you don't have a lot of baggage in terms of financial obligations, in terms of family responsibilities, or just expectations from your society. Not many of you have the burden of that kind of a burden. But for those of you who do, I fully respect that, and I hope that you're able to transform that into your competitive advantage and to your benefit. So the point I'm trying to drive here is that this is a time that you have to be massively risk-oriented, because this is the time that you can afford to do so. On that note, let's begin the presentation for today. I want to start by discussing the agenda that we have for you. I'll begin by sharing a brief introduction about myself. Then we'll dive deep into what is my perspective on certain early career principles that have worked for me and hopefully will be of benefit to you as well. We'll save the last 15 to 20 minutes for discussion, meaning we'll open the floor to all the creatives who have joined in to hear your thoughts, your comments, and your feedback on everything that you're about to hear. So without further ado, let's begin. So the name's Ahmed Naseer. I am a third culture kid, which means that I was raised in a culture that was different from the ones my parents were born into and different from the nationality or my country that I belong to. which already makes up for a very compelling business school story, if you like. In terms of my alter ego, I am the co-founder and curator of a platform called Start With How, which tries to answer the kind of questions that we'll be discussing today on career how-tos. But more on that later. My day job is a strategy and performance management consultant for SIDF, which is the key financial enabler driving Saudi Arabia's industrial evolution. Since graduating, I've had the good fortune of working in management consulting across different industries and both local as well as international consulting firms. My educational background is that I have a degree in business administration, and I've had the good fortune of starting and finishing my primary through high school education in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. So that's enough about me. Let's move on to the next slide. My teacher used to say that when there's an elephant in the room, introduce it. So I want to begin my presentation by introducing the elephant in the room. That is, I don't know where I'm going. This was a thought that struck me 3 years ago when I just graduated. And the chances are that most of you who read the description and who signed up for this feel the same. Until I read the rest of the quote, which goes like this: I'm on my way. Now, this is a quote by Carl Sandburg, and it offers a sense of reassurance for me. But the point I'm trying to drive to you all is that life is about two phases, right? One phase of your life is discovering your passion. And the second phase of your life is about realizing your passion. And what we fail to realize, those of us who are in our early career phase, that the pursuit of discovery in itself is pleasure, has a lot of pleasure in it. What I'm trying to say that it's not the destination that matters, but it's the journey that counts, right? And I hope through the principles that we discussed today, you will exhibit that in your respective endeavors. So getting to the crux of today's discussion, early career principles that I feel based on my experience and perspective, and hopefully backed by, I will also be sharing certain research topics that back each of these that will support these arguments. So without further ado, the first one is to design serendipity. The second is of careful experimentation. And finally is to have a grit mindset. We'll dive deep into each one of these. But what I would like to do at the end of each principle to make this more engaging and interactive is for you to enter your answers or your perspective for each one of them in the chat, and then we can pick it up in the discussion after this section of the presentation. So on designing serendipity, serendipity, according to Sheikh Google, is the unexpected occurrences and development of events by chance, right? So what does designing serendipity entail? It means that you're making a conscious intention of taking control of the kind of experiences that you're going to take up, whether it's college, whether it's entrepreneurship, or whether it's a full-time job, right? And this needs to start with an increased degree of self-awareness as well as humility. And I think there's no better person who's exhibited that than Satya Nadella, when he said that knowing what you don't know is wisdom, and figuring out how to learn is intelligence, right? I want you to pause and think about that for a moment. What Satya Nadella was trying to say, that having a mindset of learn it all is better than having a mindset of know it all. Because what this helps is having a mindset of innovation and growth rather than one of repetitive and regurgitative learning, right? So on that note, I have a statistic here for you. According to the New York Fed, 80% of people work in areas that have no direct link with their major or field of study, right? Now, there's an upside as well as a downside to this. The upside is that college, like other experiences, is a serendipitous journey, right? Where you constantly learn about yourself, where you reinvent yourself, and you're exploring a topic every day. But the downside is that a huge proportion of people are entering the workforce without the kind of education that they've invested in for. So you're talking about spending $250,000 and then working in something that's completely unrelated. So I want you to reflect on that and think about that before we dive deep into designing serendipity. Now, there are 3 tools or tips that I'd like to share on designing serendipity. I know there are a lot of threes. As consultants, we like speaking in threes, so and it's easy to remember that way. So these 3 tips are essentially filters for you to recognize on how you can design these journeys. The first one is to identify your niche. What is a niche? A niche is an area of interest or a certain job or even a subject that fascinates or drives you, that gives you a sense of calling, right? And notice that I've put it in brackets because more often than not, people in early careers have more than one interest that they like to pursue, right? For me personally, I wanted to pursue a career in either strategic planning or in marketing, or join the mainstream consulting world, and I'm glad it worked out. So a filter for you to identify your niche is to be solution centric, right? What does that mean? It means that ask yourself that, is there a problem that nobody is solving? And does your interest help in mitigating crisis or instigating the crisis? You want to be looked at as someone who is expanding hope in a time where people are lost or confused or seeking for inspiration, right? So that's a very useful question to ask yourself in identifying your niche. The second is to understand which kind of environments do you optimize for fit. What do I mean by fit? Fit is the extent or the difference between who you are and what you do, right? So there's 2 schools of thought around this, and I want to draw your attention towards this because I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. There's the Malcolm Gladwell school of thought, where he talks about outliers. The 10,000-hour rule. People with deliberate practice can turn out to become the giants in their field. And then there's the second school of thought by Dave Epstein on range. Dave Epstein argues that breadth is the ally of depth. That it's important to early on, it's important to experiment in different areas of your interest, as well as explore some degree of depth in them to identify or specialize in your career further. I want to give you 2 anecdotes to break that down. I understand it's a lot of theory. Tiger Woods, one of the absolute greats in golf, was known to be someone who was magnanimous, completely razor focused in this field of golf from an early age. So, his father always pushed him from a very young age to play golf, and no surprises there. He's one of the best golf players that we're seeing today. But on another hand, there's an interesting case study on Roger Federer. Roger Federer took a path that was hybrid in terms of a generalist versus a specialist path. And here's what Roger Federer did. During the early years of his life, Roger Federer was very good at 3 sports, or 3 at least that come on the top of my mind. It was skiing, soccer, and basketball. It wasn't until later and eventually that he developed an interest or passion in the field of tennis and ventured out in it during his teenage years, way later than many of his peers had, right? So we have an example of someone who thrived in a specialist environment versus someone who thrived in a generalist and then later a specialist environment, right? Let's pause here and end this note on one thing, that there was an interesting study, and I will share it with the presentation later, on how deep generalists are going to replace the specialists in the future of workforce, right? The world of AI and the world of Industry 4.0 is one that is changing at an unprecedented pace. You need to learn things rapidly and quickly, and at the same time, be exceptionally, be someone who can learn things very fast. The crux of that study is this, and I'm quoting from it directly. It says that when in an age of Industry 4.0, or an age of AI, generalists will be the ones who keep their jobs, and not only keep their jobs, but also demand a premium in the market for what they bring to the table. Because these are the professionals who will push the boundaries of creativity, of innovation, in a time where artificial intelligence is going to become mainstream, right? So their competitive advantage will be to constantly be able to learn, unlearn, and relearn certain skills in a time where things are changing so rapidly. So this is another filter for you to consider when you weigh between your interests. Last tip here on designing serendipity is one of my personal favorites. It's always proxy for people. What does that mean? And when you're starting out, it is natural. It is but natural to get distracted and think about the things that matter the most, right? For example, good salary, a good position, or a good title. But once you've chosen the environment that you want to get into, the rule of thumb is that you need to always ensure that you surround yourself with people who bring out the best in you. Okay, people who are able to help you distinguish between your comfort zone as well as your bubble of confidence, if you like, right? Because those are the people who will end up who you will be grateful for in the future for helping you recognize your strengths and identifying your weaknesses. So it's important early on that when you're designing these journeys, whether it's university, whether it's a job, or whether it's entrepreneurship, that you always proxy for people. Because after all, you're the average of the 5 people you hang out with. So reflection here before we move on to the next. How are you approaching discovery? Please enter your answers in the chat and we can discuss that later. Moving on to the second principle. And before that, I want to recognize that the joy of careers is in the pleasure of discovery, as we indicated, right? You cannot be married to a certain outcome. When you are experimenting for what works for you and what doesn't, it is the beauty of science and discovery that you let the experiment tell you the truth, right? You don't establish the truth beforehand, but rather you let the experiment tell you the truth. So careful experimentation begins with a conscious intention that you don't want to be a product of your environment, but rather you want the environment to be a product of you. Let's go over the 3 tips and tools that will help you get through this. The first one is no rocket science. It's get started, right? Because the secret of getting ahead is getting started. And here's why I think it should be the first thing that you do. You know, when you build something, the amount of comfort and confidence that you derive from it will push you, and make you and give you a sense of validation to bring out certain talents that you didn't know existed before, right? So whether it's a relationship, whether it's a product, um, uh, whether it's your CV, something as simple as that, it is very important for you to build something so that you find comfort in the same. The second thing, um, on the note of careful experimentation, is to expand your luck surface area. I love this theory by Jason Roberts, who's a serial entrepreneur, where he explains that luck surface area is directly proportional to the degree to which you do something that you're passionate about, and combined with the total number of people you've effectively communicated to. What does this mean? It means that you're doing something passionately, you're doing it right, you're being very detail oriented, and you're seeing it through the end. But at the same time, you're ensuring that you're showcasing or you're telling the right people in the right networks. This platform, for example, Creative Mornings, is an amazing platform for artists, for poets, for people in the areas, in different areas, right? So think about that. You might have something that you might have a very solid product, but if you don't have a platform or a network to share it with, it's not gonna get you lucky, right? Jason Roberts says that the way you can hack serendipity is by expanding your luck surface area. The last thing, or the last tip for careful experimentation, is that feedback feeds forward. What does this mean? You know, if I put on my performance management hat, um, our role is to set objectives, KPIs, and targets for the entire organization, right? And we do that for a reason, so that our board of directors has something measurable to track the organization as well as the employee performance. But my notion here is, why don't we look at human beings as institutions among themselves, right? You need to have goals for yourself, and you need to have your own set of board of directors. Because these board of directors are the ones who are going to come and intervene and tell you when something's not going right, or when you can, or when you're doing something right, and that you should continue doing better. You know, I've been fortunate through my entire career to have fantastic mentors, both within and outside my organization, who've constantly pushed me in either pivoting towards the next big thing, or steering away from something that wasn't necessarily working in my favor career-wise, right? So it's important to set goals for yourself, have a board of directors, both within your organization or university or wherever, and outside. And the third thing for feedback is obviously ask for feedback on a routine basis, whether it's quarterly, whether it's monthly, and so on and so forth. Some tips on feedback before we conclude this section. When you ask for feedback, always ensure that your mentor is aware about the kind of success that you're trying to achieve, right? So, say for example, in the case of management consulting, if I have a mentor within my organization and I want to go up to him and ask, where do you see me in the next 2-3 years of my life? He's going to come and tell me that if you want to be a senior consultant, or if you want to be a manager, here's what you need to do, and here's what you need to stop doing. So your managers or your mentors need to be informed of your expectation of your goals in order to provide you the appropriate feedback. And in the case when you do not receive feedback that's useful, try asking for advice instead. You know, some people are hesitant to tell you things for what they are. And when they give advice, it's something either that they have learned in their past, or it's something that they want to tell you in a different way. So ask for advice instead of, if you don't get the right feedback. And the last thing, and the question I want to pose to all of you on careful experimentation is, when was the last time you did something for the first time, right? And if the answer to that question is no in a long time, something's wrong. Because in an age where things are changing so rapidly, you cannot help but you need to stay relevant, and there's always something that you need to learn, unlearn, and relearn. So ask yourself this question, that when was the last time you did something for the first time? And that will be your litmus test for whether your experimentation process is going right. The last principle is having a grit mindset. Okay. There's an amazing researcher at the University of Pennsylvania called Angela, and she has done immense work in the areas of grit and self-control. She defines grit as the combination of passion and perseverance to meet long-term goals, right? So having a grit mindset means that you're passionate at what you do and that you persevere, and that you're here for the long run and not for the short runs. So on that note, there are 3 tools and 3 tips that I want to share with you again on having a grit mindset. The first one is to give more to get more. You know, don't underestimate the power of your enthusiasm. You know, when you're fresh out of university and you're all bubbly and you're trying to create impact, um, people might not take you seriously, right? So you need to show versus tell, because in the end, people listen with their eyes, and people don't listen with their ears. So early on, it's very important to recognize that you need to have a mindset of giving before you ask. I want to share with you my experience in this regard, right? That if you monetize for your skill set early on, you're not going to get anywhere, right? You should always think about the kind of skills that you're going to develop. And this, by the way, brings me back to the previous point on when you proxy for people, that you develop the right kind of skills when you surround yourself with the right kind of people, right? So getting back to the story that I was mentioning, you know, when I started on early on in management consulting, I am very grateful to those people who took me into a board meeting, who took me into an executive meeting, when knowing full well that I probably had zero to contribute to that meeting, right? Zero, nada, completely. But here's why they did that, you know. And honestly, I'm telling you, the only thing that I would do is enter the meeting, and the only thing I would say is thank you and goodbye. But what would happen after the meeting is what matters, right? I made sure I took notes. I made sure I paid attention to what was going on. I made sure to identify the kind of decisions that were being made and the rationale behind each. I watched where people pushed back. I watched where people didn't push back. And that itself was incredibly rewarding to me personally, right? So I took all of this information, digested it, and leveraged it in a way of showing how I can bring value to the table. So on the note of giving more, say, for example, you entered a meeting and you heard your manager say that we need to get this done by Thursday, right? And then there was complete lack of ownership in the meeting. No one took the interest to volunteer. Think about, after the meeting, going up to your manager or your colleague and saying, hey, you know, that was due on Tuesday or Thursday. Tell me how I can help. You know, having that sense of ownership and that willingness, that intellectual curiosity builds a sense of trust and empower, and people or managers will be more willing to give you more responsibility than you could have ever imagined, right? And to me, in the first 3 or 5 years of your career, getting more responsibility is, and being recognized for someone who adds value to the table every time I'm invited for an opinion, is more valuable than a 3,000 real increment in salary or a promotion that is meaningless. So have a generous mindset when you enter your workforce, or whether it's any endeavor that you get into. The second principle or note here is negotiate. This is an interesting one, by the way, because I have no absolute evidence to back it up, but I have to share with you a story that's worked or actually two stories that's very important to know. You know, people with a mindset of grit are the ones who don't take no for an answer. I'll give you my experience of my younger brother, Talal. He's currently in university, right? In his senior year of high school, he applied to a summer program at Georgetown University that was restricted to just international students. Okay, the team wrote back to him saying that, sorry, we cannot accept your application. Um, this is only for international students, and that we cannot offer you the position. A normal person would have taken that feedback and moved on, pretend like nothing happened, and think about the next step. But what he did was a step further. Along with the application, he submitted letters of recommendation, supporting documentation. He wrote a very convincing statement of purpose. And guess what happened? They admitted him, right? And he was the only international student to be admitted in a summer program that was meant to be, that was not open for international students. And fast forward 3 years, he's now graduate. He's a senior year student at Georgetown University with a scholarship. So that's how life plays out, right? It's just these moments that, Qadar Allah, it's from ghaib. It's the power of the unknown. Another interesting story, before we quickly move on, is my personal story on when I was searching for my first job, right? There was a consulting firm that I was really keen on getting into. I applied twice on 2 opportunities that they had showcased on different occasions, right? Both the times I didn't hear anything from the recruiter. Naturally, I was feeling disappointed that they're not paying attention to my resume and so on and so forth. Until one day I saw a tweet from the partner of the firm saying that, inviting people from the general public, by the way, that we've opened an office in Riyadh. We want to invite you in to come and explore our services and talk to us about your interests. Now, obviously, I'm not someone who's a customer. I was trying to get into the firm. I tweeted back saying, hey, can I have an appointment? I would love to discuss with you certain interests about your company or your firm. The next day, I received a call from the secretary. We set up a meeting. 1 week later, I have an interview at the firm, right? So, again, the point I'm trying to drive is, don't take no for an answer. And especially when you don't even hear no, right? You need to persist sometimes. But at the same time, you have to be respectful of your employers, your managers, or people who can provide you such opportunities, of their time and of their schedules. The last thing, and one of the things that is that really hits home for most of us, is perseverance, right? Ray Dalio, the billionaire hedge fund manager, a legend, absolute legend, said that pain plus reflections is equal to progress. And I couldn't help but relate to this, because in a world where people are in lockdown, the boundaries between life and work are getting very artificial, right? They're almost disappearing. It is quite natural that you interpret rejection in life is equal to rejection at work is equal to rejection in life, right? And I want to tell you to take a step back, because an entire sea of water cannot sink a ship unless you let the water come in, right? So it's very important on how you deal with failures or rejections. On dealing with failure and rejection, I want to share with you a very interesting model that's worked for me, and I hope it will work for you as well. It's the capability, fit, and intent model. Whenever you're faced with a rejection, ask yourself along these 3 parameters. Number 1, was it a rejection or failure because of fit? If yes, it's a win. It's not a loss. What do I mean by that? If you face a rejection based on a cultural misfit, right, or mismatch, sorry, that certain university does not believe that you belong to their tribe, so to speak. believe me, it's a win in your favor, because if I give you an analogy, you don't want to be married to a ghost, right? Or someone who has no absolute compatibility with you. So rejection and fit is a win. On capability, these are the kind of rejections that you can are solvable, right? You recognize that there are certain skills, there are certain qualifications that you need to improve. So these kind of rejections are easier to fix. The last one, intent, are the ones that are the most, let's say, the ones that require the most inner reflection, right? Because rejections related to or affecting intent are the ones that are usually related to social validation or just ego, right? Or having a sense of proving something to someone, right? So it requires certain reflection from you to see, am I really disappointed from this because I didn't deserve it, or I mean, I deserved it, but I didn't get it, or just because I was trying to prove a point, right? So it's important to reflect on your rejections across these three parameters. I want to conclude this note on sharing one of my favorite quotes of all time, which is, when the winds of change blow, some build shelters and others build windmills. So my question to you all is, are you someone who builds a shelter, or are you someone who builds a windmill? As we come to the end, I want to share with you, and I think some of them are on the call today, a call to action. That is, be grateful, right? It is very important that, especially in the early careers of phases of your life, that you show a sense of gratitude to the ones who gave you opportunity when no one else did, right? It's among the words, it's among the sayings of the, even amongst the sayings of our Prophet, peace be upon him, where he said, and forgive me if I'm saying this wrong, La yashkurullaha man la yashkurun nas. Like those who are not thankful to the people are not thankful to God, right? And so in Surah Ibrahim, God, Allah says that if you're not thankful to God, He will not increase you in favors. So you have to be grateful to those who uh, who gave you the opportunity, who gave you the time, just to push you one step at a time, even if it meant one step further, right? So this is my ode to as a thank you. And one of my favorite quotes from Isaac Newton is, "If I have seen further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants." So these are some people who are the giants who have stood upon, but there are many more who are either in this chat and who are not listening to this, or hopefully will listen to this later, who I'm grateful for to where I am today. So after this talk, I encourage you all to please go pick up the phone, write an email, a thank you to your mentors, to your teachers, and so on. A quick thing, a 60-second pitch on what Start With How is about. Start With How is a platform that I've created to co-founded actually with my sister, who is the interviewer you see in these pictures, that creates and curates content on career how-tos. Okay, what does that mean? In the world of AI and the fourth industrial revolution, the questions of how and why are becoming increasingly important. Okay, the what questions are the ones that Chef Google can answer, as I said earlier. It's the how and why questions that matter. You know, your why can give you your vision and destination, but your how is really the roadmap on how you can get to where you want to be in terms of discovering or realizing your passion. So I'm not negating the why question. Don't get me wrong. Simon Sinek is one of my heroes. You know, we share a lot of things in common, for example, the same specs. But I'm only suggesting a conversation that can help others, that can help move the needle for others, right? So that's about our platform. I encourage you all, if you like what we discussed today, to check out our Instagram page to see if you to share such content. I'm going to end this by one last reminder by saying, hit pause, right? The problem that we're seeing today isn't having a career, right? The problem is when your career becomes your ultimate goal. That is when we no longer own our work. but our work owns us. So I want to tell you guys to take a step back, close a few tabs, because once you recognize that you've done your work seriously, it's important to leave it up to God, right? What is meant to be will happen. Dale Carnegie says, remember, today is the tomorrow you worried about yesterday. So on that note, I just want to conclude by saying, don't overthink, because if you overthink like me, you'll grow old faster. I just turned 25 today, and my brother at the dinner table tells me that you're not entering quarter life crisis. You're probably 33% already into your life, right? So just on a lighter note there, I want to conclude this by thanking you all again